Aloha mai kako, and welcome to Inspired by Aloha, a podcast dedicated to making your day a little brighter by showcasing that inspirational people and acts of aloha surround us every day. My name is Amy.
And I'm Shireen.
And I'm Erin.
And we are so grateful that you've chosen to spend a few minutes with us as we get ready to be
Inspired by Aloha.
Welcome back, everyone. One of the reasons we created this podcast was to celebrate the extraordinary works of everyday people. Our guest today is such a person. She inspires hope through her selfless humanitarian acts of aloha. She is a mother, a foster parent, a teacher, a pastor, a philanthropist, an advocate, a lifelong learner, and to me, she's the personification of what it means to live aloha. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Abigail Eli to today's podcast. Yay!
It's our studio audience.
So glad to be here.
Hello, Abby. Aloha, Abby. Hello. How fun
Aloha.
that it is we get to connect with you today. You know, you and I first met around 2017. And from our first meeting, I was so impressed and fascinated by your life's philosophy and your choices. And since then, correct me if I'm wrong, you have become the founder and executive director for the Makaha Community Center. You folks run a Christmas for Keiki project, and you're the pastor for the Waianae Assembly of God. You've been featured in articles and news reports for the visionary philanthropic work that you've done to support our Leeward Coast families. And there's just so much to cover today because of all the positive ways in which you provide for our island communities. I'm so thrilled to have you here. So let's start and talk with you. Okay. So,
Right.
so Abby, thank you so much for being here. You know, why don't you start off by telling us about yourself, like your story, where you come from, your background, and really in what ways do you feel that this has impacted the work you're pursuing today?
Oh, okay. Well, so I am the second oldest of 11 children. I come from the Endo family. My dad's Calvin Endo, and he does a lot for the community as well. So I think that kind of was something that we grew up, just really like seeing somebody who really like served all the time. And we were voluntold a lot, so that helped. But I grew up, so I've lived in Waianae my whole life. So I got to experience all the beautiful things of Waianae, and I've also experienced all of the hardships, and many different hardships. So I think one of the things that, growing up in Waianae was one, I was constantly outdoors, I wasn't always inside, trapped inside. So that was actually one of the things that I think helps for what I do today is how adventurous I was as a child, always, biking. I was running on roofs, jumping off of roofs, and getting to fights with boys on the streets,
and winning, and winning those fights.
Yeah, and so that was a normal, and then, just being in a home with so many children, I see now how that has influenced much of what I've been able to do as a teenager growing up. You're in a home with so much noise and so much, bumping here. You're trying to do your homework. You're in the middle of kids and just a bumping. You're just doing your work, and you eventually don't feel it. You don't see it. You don't hear it. It just becomes your normal. So if you know the kind of home that I have today with the amount of children that I have today, it really, I believe that I was already kind of bred for what I'm able to do and the things I've been able to, like survive it. I guess I won't say survive. I actually love it, but yeah, just some of those things I see that has had an impact. One of the stories that I remember growing up, my mom, when I was younger, someone had stolen our bike, and so we were complaining. We're like, hey, we got to call the police, kind of, right? We're kids, and we're like, we got to do something about this. Justice needs to be done, and my mom was saying, have you ever considered that you're in a community where there's many children that never had a bike? And she would just kind of open her eyes to see how little others had. And I think that has impacted my whole life. And she would always make the statement often. She had said, when people are at their worst, is when they need to be loved the most. And see all these little things in from my childhood growing up in YNI. She would send me to school with extra pencils. If somebody asked for a pencil, she said give it to them. She would send me to field trips with extra money. It's like find that kid that doesn't have anything. I do that today with my children. I always send them with extra money to every field trip. I said find the kid that you see isn't buying anything. I said I want you to bless them. And so those kinds of things I think from my childhood were things that were ingrained in me that I see now has just been a part of my life, and you just kind of can overlook it sometimes too easily, but they're a big part of what I do and why I do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Mhm.
So, one example in which you've demonstrated aloha has been your joy of being a foster parent. What made you decide to become a foster parent, and how would you describe that experience?
So I have 7 biological children, right? And I have 2 that are adopted through the CPS system, CWS system, and then I have all the rest. They're all Hanide, and we've never had any kind of financial support for them. We have just really just we depend on God to provide, and He has faithfully provided for them. But what inspired me to do this when I was about 12, I was homeschooled for most of my elementary years. So I only went to first and second grade in Makaha Elementary. And then I went to the intermediate school for the first time, and I went through the shock of my life. I saw things like where I was like, how could they be so brutal? I was so like, what? So I saw boys grab the blind girl's stick and hit her legs with the stick. We saw someone I saw someone steal, these 2 boys came and stole a Down syndrome boy's backpack, and they were playing keep away, making him chase back and forth. And I remember this hero coming along, this one boy, and they thought, oh, you're joining us. And he went like this, to say, hey, throw it to me. And they threw it to him, and he caught it, and he gave it back to that homeless boy, I mean, the Down
Yay.
syndrome child, and
Wow.
and patted him on the shoulder, saying, hey, I got you. And then he walked him away from that situation. I was like, I fell in love that day. He didn't know it, but I had a crush at that moment. But I just thought, wow, that was like that. I was so frustrated seeing the amount of bullying that was happening in the schools. But one of the things is, so I befriended. So it was like I drew all the rejects, I guess, from in the school, and so because I was just very kind, very very quiet. So anybody who was the outcast in the school became my friends. And I would hear this story so often as many of my peers would begin to open up and tell their story, the abuses that they were going through. Many were in foster care, and they were being sexually abused and very badly neglected or physically abused. Now, as a 12-year-old, I didn't know what to do. And I was a very quiet person, so I didn't share their stories because I was a trusting. I wish I knew more at that time. But I remember thinking as a 12-year-old, one day I'm going to grow up and I'm going to take in children. I'm going to make sure that they're safe. It's like that somebody's going to make sure that they're safe. And I've always had this dream of having a home where I took in like 100 children that were not wanted, the older teens that nobody wanted to adopt, and having a home where I just loved on them and kept them safe and helped them through life. And so it was interesting that this has been a dream, and I've talked about it since I was young, and I kept thinking one day I'll have that. And then one day I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it now. I never even thought about it. It just became something that just happened. And so I remember the first 2 kids, I bought their school supplies. They were my neighbors, and they just had so little. They had so little. Of often they didn't have food in their house, and so they would always come over and eat at my house. And I remember they were the first kids that they were going to school. They didn't have school supplies, so I bought them all their school supplies and sent them off, and they became a real big part of our lives and still are today. And they're fully grown now, but I've been doing this for years.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness. I mean,
Yeah.
see, isn't she a beautiful soul? I'm like, it's like I'm sitting
Yeah.
over here trying to like not cry and stuff.
Oh, I
But
already am.
I
But
know.
I'm thinking about if I were one of those keiki in your home, I would think like it wouldn't matter to me how many people were there or
Mhm.
how little space I had. I would just feel like I'm in a safe place
There's
Yeah.
love.
with people
Yeah.
that love me.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when I had just 5 children, I was complaining about how small my house was. I was like, there's not enough space for all these kids, you know. And I remember just having this vision years ago, and what I saw was that I was in the Philippines. And so all of a sudden I'm in the Philippines just looking at these people coming in from the fields. And their home was a tin shack and their floor was a dirt floor. And so inside this tin shack, all I saw was a board that went across the back of it. And on it had a few pots and bowls and things like that. But there was very little in this shack. And so all these people are coming in from the fields. There were like 15, 15, maybe 20 people that came in from the fields, like little kids, and it's like, and they look exhausted. They were dirty. They were wearing tattered clothes, but they just look exhausted. They're taking off their hats and everything, and they roll out the mats. They start rolling out these mats, and they start sleeping side by side with little kids all between them. They fit all 15 to 20 people in this tiny itty bitty like tin shack. And then in this vision, I saw all of a sudden now my house, their house. So they're standing in front of my house. All of these people that I saw in this vision in the Philippines are now standing in front of my house. And I can tell that my house is their house. It's like that they
Wow.
were just given this house. And so they're carrying their garbage bags with all their stuff, which wasn't very much. And I remember them looking at my house and they dropped their bag and they started sobbing. They were crying. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a mansion. We could fit 100 people in there."
Mm.
And I have never looked at my
Mhm.
house the same.
I love that. The love that you have, the community, the security and the safeness, that's what's important, even more than the space. So, I want to talk a little bit. You had mentioned earlier about your journey with the children that you've taken. And I had heard and read about like in 2016, you made this important, bold decision to move your family to a Waianae homeless camp for a couple months. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and what led you to this decision and even what that experience was like for you and your family?
Oh, absolutely. Be my privilege because that's just one of our favorite experiences in life. Well, in 2016, um I just my relationship with God, I'm a pastor, so I have a relationship with God, and I really kept hearing him say he wanted me to take my family to, or he wanted me, he didn't say family, he said he wanted me to go move in with the homeless at this encampment. And before that we had gone, previously in the years, to take donations. We've gone through and we've walked through and done things to be of assistance to that community. But I remember just feeling, I was like, there's got to be more that we can do. There's got to be more than this. And so as God was just really like putting it on my heart, and it was like for 2 months straight, he just kept repeating, "I want you," and it got stronger and stronger, the pull. And so finally I brought it up to my family and I said, hey, I feel like God is calling me to live with the homeless at Puahonua, Oainai. I said, I don't want to force any of you to go. So I had 12 children at the time. And I said, I don't want to force any of you to go with me. So if you want to go, I'm going to go for at least 1 month because I don't feel like I could really learn, what they're going through by just staying a couple days, So, and I said, so if you want to come with me, we're making a 1 month commitment. I said, you won't have electricity, you won't have water. I said, you won't have your beloved ACs because it's summertime, it is hot. And so I said, if you don't want to go, you can stay with grandma or my sister. And surprisingly, all 12 said, yes, we want to go. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, which is amazing. I think my oldest was 13 at the time and my youngest was 3.
Wow.
and and so I asked Auntie Twinkles, can we come and live with you? I didn't tell her I was a pastor. I didn't tell her anything really about myself. I just said, hey, we would like to experience this, and is it okay? And I was a little worried that they were gonna think that I was like playing like this was a game or something.
Mm.
But they really embraced us, and they told us where we could set up, and we spent a few weeks, at least maybe about a month, preparing the area before we even moved in, because there was all these grass pods in there. And one of the things that they told us was, make sure all your tents are on pallets. And
Ah.
so to do that, you have to like clear the land to
Mhm.
make it flat. They said because there's so many centipedes, and when the floods come and when the storms come, all your stuff will get wiped out if it's not on pallets. So imagine having to haul pallet after pallet. It's all the way in the back, so we have to carry it all the way back there. So that took a lot. And then I wanted to build a whole pallet fence, for my 3-year-old to keep him enclosed. So it was just a lot of work. People don't realize that part of it.
Wow.
But so we
Mhm.
wound up actually staying there, and I fell in love with this community. I mean, it's like whenever I think of this community, my heart just, it just lights up. I love the people in this community. And so that 1 month stay actually wound up being 2 months. We stayed from May through July, because at the end of the 1 month, we asked the kids, it's like, who wants to leave? They're like, nobody wants to leave. It was such a beautiful experience. Let me tell you one of the things that I saw that I thought, wow, it's so incredible. When you have no electronics, all
Mhm.
you see is people.
Mm.
Mm.
And my kids and I learned that people are much more important than electronics. We had more family time, more discussion time, more fun, more playing, more, going together to the beach, and all of this, it's like, was it more work? Yeah, there was a lot of work, having to haul out your trash. You have to haul in your water every single day. It's like, it was a lot of work, but it was such a beautiful experience. And so we saw how this community like really helps each other when the storms came. The storms, oh my gosh, it's like every time I hear the storms, and even recently we had such bad
Mm.
storming, all I can think about are my friends there. Because their tents will get ripped up, and the winds will just demolish their area, and tents will collapse. And I would see those who were older, who could barely walk, they're just barely pushing their cart down the dirt road. It's like my kids would go help them get water and stuff. But when the storms came in, I saw their tents collapsing. All I saw was those who were in their 30s, those who were in their 20s and 40s. They said, "Uncle, you need help." And in the storm, they're helping
Mm.
their neighbors. When someone was sick, for days, they were checking on their neighbors. I saw this one woman, and she had nothing. She had nothing. And this one lady's like, "Hey, you got any food? I haven't eaten for like 3 days." And she said, "I got this one can." And so she gives her last can of food. And I asked her, I said, "What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?" And she says, "I always get taken care of somehow. It's okay." She needed it more. And
Mm.
then one of my favorite stories was, they had a man who just got out of the hospital, and the hospital had said he had a really bad breathing condition, so he was hooked up to tubes and things, and or an oxygen machine. And they had said, "You really should stay in an AC area." He's like, "I'm homeless. How am I supposed to do that?" So he lived in his truck. But what they did is, he had a little trailer, a really small trailer. The guys at the pool, like they built him a little shack, like with just plywood, and they put an AC in it, and they had a external generator that this guy had as well, and they connected it.
Wow.
Oh,
So
so smart.
live in that community, but he just was a homeless person that traveled because he had a vehicle.
Mm.
And so he tried to leave the community, and it got stuck in this like little ditch kind of a thing, and they couldn't get out. This is 2 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody went through the village with a pot and a spoon, going, said, "Kids, like, get up, get up, get up. We need help. We need help. Men, we need you up. We need you up."
Wow.
And so all these men start coming out of their tents, and they didn't, no complaints whatsoever. They all went over there, lifted the trailer, and got this man going. And I just remember, it's like,
Wow.
Could I ever do that in my community? I don't think
Mm.
I've ever seen. I've seen some pretty tough stuff that neighbors have gone through, and sometimes we see the extension, but not to the degree that I saw in this community. And so, did I see some things that were hard to see? Yeah, I did. But I saw so many beautiful things, and we fell in love with the children there because we had so many kids. We were a kid magnet. So we had all the kids from the encampment every single day. We were feeding them, and they'd stay with us, and we just fell in love with this community. But what spurred me on to do what I do is I would go around and I would say, "Hey, what's the hardest part about being homeless?" Like of all the years, I met people there that were there for 6 years, and sometimes people think, "Oh, they must be all drug addicts." It's like they all. I'll take tours. I'll take people from Honolulu or even internationally. We'll have all these missions teams come, and I'll take them down there and I'll have them spend the night sometimes and experience it for themselves. The having to shower in the cold, because you have to shower at night. If you use the water spigots. And I'll just make them experience that of never feeling clean, because the minute you shower and the wind blows, all the
Yeah.
dirt is all over you. Yeah, being there without anything, I'll let them take some food, um I'll have them pick out food, but I don't tell them how they're gonna cook it. It's like, or how they're gonna be able to make it. And then they have no pans, they have no can openers, they have nothing. It's like, how are you gonna eat that? I was like, because if they don't figure it out, then they don't get to eat that day.
Wow.
So it's just that kind of a thing of letting them experience what it looks like to
Mm.
have nothing at all, and you have to depend on your neighbors. You need to hope that someone will be charitable to let you use their pan or let them use their can opener or things like that. So that was an experience. But here I am. I'm asking the families that live there, that have lived there, because it's like people have again judged them. And so I said, what's the hardest thing about being homeless? From the oldest to the youngest, they said it's how people treat us. It's how people have made judgments against us when they don't know. They said sometimes we're on the bus and they don't realize we live in this community, and they're like, "Oh, all these guys are drug addicts." And they said they don't know us. I met people that work for schools. I met people who worked for the city and county. And one of the things, this one lady that lived there, she was working two jobs. She didn't have any problems. All of a sudden, she said, I tried to get out of my bed one morning and I couldn't move. Something like went out in her back. And she said, I just couldn't get out of bed. So she said, I went through months and months of treatment. I eventually wound up losing my jobs. And she said, one of them was TDI, but I couldn't live off of that. So I lost my place.
Mm.
I lost everything. And she said, and here I am. And some of them won't go into shelters because they have animals that are family to them,
Mm.
right? So there's that issue as well. But I had another couple that lived right directly behind us, and actually today they're living in a shed on my property today. It's like, but
Oh.
they were there for 6 years, and they told me their story, and they said each of us had two or three jobs, like. And she said, and one of I don't remember if she said one got injured or one got sick, but somehow they lost the ability to work. And she said, and we were living paycheck to paycheck because none of them had higher education, so they were living just with minimum wage jobs or under
Mm.
the table jobs. And so they were barely making it. They had six children. And she said, and when we lost that income, we lost everything.
Mm.
She said, but we wound up living here with our kids. And she said, and I remember when we got to a place where we could sustain ourselves again, where we could go get a place, and he could go back to work. um, she said, we looked at each other, said, is it even worth it? We never even get to see each other. We never get to see our children. She said, maybe it's better that we just live off the land and actually get to be a family. I
Wow.
remember just hearing stories like that. And these were not, there's a lot of people there that are not addicted. I mean, are there people? Yes, I do see that as well. But one of the things that I saw was a lot of broken people in that community. that would say, you know, it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's like they said, if you hit rock bottom, it's like the only way is up. They said, I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost my family. It's like, I lost everything. Look at me, I'm homeless, for goodness sake. I still can't seem to get off this stuff. And I remember talking to them. I said, well, maybe you're trying to heal from the outside in instead of the inside out. I said, you know, if you have a headache, you might want to reach for some Tylenol. If I had a scratch, I wouldn't want anything. If I had a headache, I'd go for Tylenol or Advil or something, or leave. They said, but if I had my leg chopped off, I might be reaching for something stronger, you know, like morphine. I said, you have real wounds. Like, you got to hear their stories. They have real wounds. I mean, the beatings they endured. I saw three sisters that were basically, when you listen to their stories, they were like sex trafficked kids. I mean, we had men there that were in their 50s, but from the time they were 2 years old, they were tossed from wall to wall. The beatings they endured, the things they had to watch. I mean, I had one father of one of the kids that came to live with me. He said when he was young, he was playing on the lawn, and he was just playing on the lawn. The father was on the porch. All of a sudden, the father got up off the porch, went to the water hose, turned it on, and came down to him and just shoved it down his throat. You know, there was
Oh
no
my
reason.
gosh.
There wasn't a reason. He said, I remember one time watching my father, he had his arm around my mom on the couch. He said, all of a sudden, he got up, went in the kitchen, and he grabbed the cast iron frying pan, and for no reason at all, just slammed it right in her face and busted her face open. He said, I saw things. He said, I just didn't understand. And all of these children, from the time they were little, till a lot of them got kicked out or left around 16 or 17. And by that time, they were you know, very traumatized and angry, and you know, all they did was medicate these
Right,
wounds with things that were not so legal. And
right.
so I really, you know, really believe that there's so many people that just have so much heart trauma that need healing. And so we're not looking at people. When I was in the encampment, I saw three generations of homeless there. Three generations. When I listened to the advice that they were giving from one generation to the next, I realized education was not a priority. I used to play a game with the kids walking on the trails. I said, 2 times 2 is 4. And I did this with my kids the whole summer. I was like, 3 times 3 is 9. You know, it's like they would have to answer me in 3 seconds. If they could do it, they would get money and things. So all the homeless kids wanted to be a part of this game. I learned that every kid from 17 years old and down could not play this game. They didn't even know their multiplication facts. And so I definitely saw how uh, majority of the adults had never graduated from high school. Um, the ones who did graduate from high school never went on to higher education. It was very clear that education played a major role to those who were going to wind up in this kind of situation. But if people were saying like they just chose it, that they just chose that life, I would
Mhm.
have to argue the fact that is like it really appears more that it was forced upon them. You know, it's like you know, it's not like they just chose to be broken. It's not like they just chose to be wounded like that. You know, no person in their right mind would have been okay with me. Like if I was, say I was in Iraq and or Afghanistan, and I saw a wounded soldier and he was on the ground, just shot up with all shrapnel, all like a bomb exploded. He just, you see him just bleeding all over the place. He's laying out like, you know, like can barely breathe. It's like, and then I pull about 10 feet away from him and I start screaming to him. It's like, young man, I'm here to help you. It's like, but you got to get up. I'm not going to do it all for you. So if you want help, you need to find your way over to me. You know, it's like, and if there was a film crew filming me, um, you know, just screaming at this young man who was like laid out like that, you know, I probably would go down in media as the dumbest person in the world or the cruelest person in the world.
Right.
We would have comments as like, can't you see that he can't move? Can't you see that he is wounded? That you should go over there and pick him up? You know,
Right.
and the whole thing is, I would hope that we have a society that gets that when you see a wounded person, that it makes sense to go over there, put one shoulder under that shoulder, and hope someone else will come out on the other side and say, hey, I see you're wounded. I'm going to live life with you. I'm going to live life with you until every wound is healed, so that until you can walk on your own. What we're trying to do is tell these homeless people, just go into a job and get a job.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that you're wounded. Walk on all those wounds. It's like, and whenever somebody presses on a wound, if you ever see a soldier in hospital, just ask some nurses that work with these wounded soldiers, where they try to get them to walk on a broken leg or a leg that's been very damaged, and you'll hear them scream and sometimes lash out on the nurse. And that's what we're seeing today with wounded people trying to get jobs, that we're pushing on these wounds, or we're trying to get them to do things before they're healed, and they're just lashing out. It's like, and they can't hold a job for beans, it's like, because of these wounds that keep getting triggered, the PTSD and things like that. And so I really truly believe that we need to live life with this community, and help them heal from the inside out. On the other hand, I also, really believe we need to help in the area of education. So that's been my passion since leaving that place. That was an
Wow.
earful, right?
I think you hit the really the nail on the head, right? Is you cannot force change on people when they're not ready.
Yeah, yeah,
And how do you
yeah.
heal the hearts, the mental trauma, the emotional trauma,
Right,
for them to then
right.
feel that, okay, now I'm ready. I can serve somebody else. I can actually have a
Mhm.
job. When I was with another church, we did outreach with the U.S. Vet Center in Kalaeloa,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and there was a gentleman who was in my Bible study group, and and I remember one time he said, "Sister, you like see my intake picture?" I'm like, "What?" And then he showed me his ID of when he first entered, the vet center. It was a shelter, right?
Hmm.
And he was living on the
Hmm.
streets. He told me which community he lived in Alamana Beach Park. And I was like, "Wow, that's you?" And it was like, crazy hair, crazy eye, no teeth, all cookie on the face. And he's like, "Yeah, that's me." And I'm like, and I asked him, I said, "Why do you still have that?" He goes, "Oh, it's a reminder for me."
Mm.
Wow,
He said, "It's in my
wow,
wallet to remind me of where I was and where I am
wow,
today."
wow.
And he said, but for him it was, God had worked through him to restore his life, reconnect with
Yeah,
his family,
yeah,
and by healing, he was then able to get a job, and the vet center
yeah,
helped him to do that. But he
yeah.
carried that ID, his initial intake ID, with him, because he said that was a reminder of where he was and where he would not like to be again. But he said, "But I
Mm-hmm.
still have friends there, Amy, and I want to help them."
That's
And I'm like,
good.
wow. But that journey is
Hmm.
long,
It is. It
right? And there
is.
was a committed group
Yeah,
of people to help him
yeah,
through that
yeah,
journey of recovery.
yeah,
And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, hey, get one
yeah.
job, just get one house, but that is the person is still broken.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went through an experience while living there. At the very end, I got really sick, and I was, digging trenches and building gardens and stuff every day. So I was doing a lot with the dirt, and so breathing all that in, and I did not realize it was illegal dumping ground at that point of time. So there was chemicals in that. So breathing that in, I did not like, I wound up getting bronchitis for the first time in my life, and I wound up just wheezing, like you could hear a whistle in my lungs. And so I wind up passing out on the trail. Like I just kind of like, oh, lost my balance. And so they took me to the emergency room. And I won't say what emergency room, but they took me to an emergency room. And while I was there, and I'm just like barely breathing and I'm coughing just to get air in. And I tell them, I said, um, I own a home. I said, I just voluntarily lived there. I had a homeless guy move into my house. I said, I'm just been living there for the last 2 months. I said, and then I explained that I'd been breathing in all that dirt. And so they're like, what? You took your family to live with the homeless encampment? And these two nurses began to rail me for the
Mm.
next 10 minutes about how stupid I was I'm not, no joke. These are the
Wow.
words they're using. And it's like, are you crazy? It's like that you would take your family to live over there. It's like, they're like, don't you realize those are dirty people, that those are sick
Oh.
people, that they're just lazy, that they're choosing to live like that? Is like, and you would do that, and so they railed me and railed me. and I couldn't barely talk, and they kept on, and they said, well, I used to be homeless, and it's like, and I broke out of it. And so they went on, and finally I just gathered every bit of air I could breathe, and I just remember just breathing as deep as I could, and I just said, and I love that. And so they stopped, and they put me in this room, and so the doctor comes in with his clipboard, and he looked at me, and he had looked at my dirty feet because I had been working in the garden knowing that I was going to be leaving soon. And so my feet were just filthy dirty. And so he looks at me, and he says, do you do drugs? Do you drink alcohol? And I was like, never have, never will. And then he looked at me again, like more accusingly, like, and like I was lying. And he's like, do you do drugs? Are you an alcoholic? And I was like, no. He asked me a third time. And he was like, he looked at me like I was absolutely lying. And he asked me again in a more harsh tone. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, does this look like a face that does that? But I don't know, and I told him no again. They did not give me anything to clear my lungs until an hour later, after I did a urine sample. After I did a urine sample and it came out clear, then they immediately came in and gave me something to clear my air valves. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I said, this is what they were talking about. I have never, ever been asked that question more than once. I have never been treated in this kind of way before. Living at that encampment, I got to experience the discrimination that they experience on a regular basis. When you walk into that encampment, everybody's like, hi, hi, hi. Like, man, they talk stories, and you're a real person. But you walk out of the encampment, and I have never, ever had anybody look at me this way before. Automatic assumption that you must be a drug addict just because you're in a homeless encampment. I love this whole idea of aloha, it's like, because that's something that we need to be expressing more to all people. And there isn't a single, it's like one of the things my kids said, one of their takeaways, their big tech takeaways was, homeless people are just people. They're just people, and they love them. They love them and spent time with them, and just bless them, and they felt safe there. Not a single person in that community stole from us. My kids left tools and rakes and shovels and all kinds of stuff all over the place because they're just brilliant like that. But
kids.
Yeah. And it was amazing that they did not steal, and that none one of us was ever harmed. In fact, before going into that encampment, when I first told people, I said I feel like God's telling me that I should take my family to that encampment. I remember so many people, pastors included, saying, "It's like, oh, that's crazy." It's like, it's like, what, and so many criticisms began to pour in. I was so gun ho. I was like, yes, it's like this is an adventure, but then the criticism saying, what if somebody like steals from you guys? It's like there's so many thieves. It's like, what if somebody physically abuses you? There's mental people in there. It's like they could just beat you guys down. And what if somebody kills one of you or your children or sexually abuses one? There's rapists, there's criminals. There's people with guns in there. All the criminals are hiding out in there. And so then it was just like, oh, it's like, whoa, that was a scary thought. It's like, do I really know what I'm doing? But I had heard God, and so I remember feeling very intimidated. I was like, man, if anything happens to any of my kids, I said, they are going to like never let me hear the end of that. I will go down as being the worst parent in the world. And so I can say I felt that fear, set in, and I was just like, I don't know if this is what I should be doing. But I remember just going into my bedroom and getting on my knees like I always do, and I just started talking to the one I love, and I just said, God, you got to give me your perspective. This is what's happening. This is what they're saying. I said, give me your perspective. And I remember going back to those people, and this is what I said, and not everybody was happy with my response. Not everybody understood. Once you get to that place where you're already willing to be all in, I tell people, I said, unless you're willing to die for something, you will never be willing to fully live for it. You got to be all in. It's like once you're willing to already die, it's like once you're already at that place, then you'll live complete. One of the reasons why I live for my children is because I'm willing to die for them. One of the reasons I'm willing to live my life full on for God is because I'm willing to die for him. One of the reasons why I'm willing to live full on for the community and those who are hurting and broken, because I am definitely willing to die for them. If I see a woman getting beaten on the side of the road, I'm that vehicle that pulls up next to them. And when that guy is, like staring me at in the face, like he wants to beat me, and I was like, I'm not afraid to die, so you have a problem.
Mm,
So
Wow.
that's
wow.
the way I live. I'm willing to be all in. I
So,
think love moves you with compassion.
mhm.
It moves you. You can't help it. It moves you.
Mm.
So you
Mm.
talked
You know,
about education,
mhm.
the hardships, right? From,
Yeah.
not having the education. So how did that whole experience inspire you to
Mhm.
further your own education? And where did that come from? Where did that desire come
Yeah,
from?
yeah. One of the days I was out with five of the young men that lived in that community, and they were all very young. Most of them were seventh grade and sixth and fifth grade, and so I was asking them. I said, "What is your greatest aspiration in life? Like, what is your dream? Tell me your dream." And they were like, "Oh, auntie, oh, we're gonna be drug dealers." They said, "We're gonna get the pimped out car, we'll get the pimped out rims, and all the chicks is gonna want to be with us." And I remember looking at them. I was like, "You ever think about buying a house?" I said, "I bought a house when I was 19." I said, "Is that in your dream at all?" I remember two of those boys. One was 13, the other was like 6. And I took them to Ice Palace for the first time. So I tried to gather the kids from the encampment and take them to different adventures at
Mm.
different times while I lived there. One of those was the Ice Palace. I took all the kids there. And none of them knew how to skate. None of them had gone. But I remember the 13-year-old and the 6-year-old in my car. It might have been 5 or 6, but they were like, "This is so weird. This is so weird." And I'm like, what's weird? And they kept saying it. They're like, "This is weird." And I'm like, "What's weird?" And they're like, "Being in a car." They
Wow.
had been homeless their entire life.
Mm.
They didn't know anything else. And when I listened to these 5 boys in their dream, like, they had not ever dreamt of being in a house. The greatest thing they had saw was the amazing vehicle that everybody else would, because one of the big modes of transportation for those who are homeless are the bus or a bike, right? Having a car is a big deal. A pimped out car with sounds and rims and like even more, and but it just showed me where their perspective was. And so when I asked them, I was like, "Have you ever dreamed of a house?" They're like, "No," like that was never even in their mind. So to change their mindset from that poverty mindset to like a positive mindset, I can say that it took years for these young men. But I remember leaving that encampment, and honestly, this is so hard for me. I did not want to leave. I wanted to sell my house and move in permanently. I did not want to leave any of them. I fell in love. I just fell hard for this community, and my children loved it. And so I remember at the end of our stay, when it came to July, and I was like, "God, can I sell my house and live here permanently?" Like, I remember going out to, I called it my grand cathedral, but I was really just on the reef, just talking to God under the open stars and the ocean in front of me. And every night I'd go out to pray and I would ask him, I was like, can I stay? And he didn't answer me. 5 days straight, he didn't answer me. On the fifth day, I just kind of looked up to heaven and said, "Okay, God, just letting you know that if you don't answer me today, is like, I'm going to take that as a yes." And I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move in with the people. And if it's not you, close the door, slam it in my face. And on that day, I really heard him very loudly speak to me, but very gently. And he said, "Abby, it's time to go home now." And
Mm.
I was not expecting that. And he said, "I need you to go and share my heart with my children." And he showed me I'd be speaking in different churches and different places and telling him how much he loves the poor, the broken, the sick, the one who's messing up. That's why he came, you know. It's like that's the ones he loves the most. And I remember just being like no, that's the last place I want to be. You know, it's like because oftentimes you go into churches that want to do what I call hit and run ministry. You know,
Right.
it's like they come to do their duty and they're out of there. You know, it's like,
Um,
but if you're gonna help people that are broken, you have to, like, if you're really like, if we take the, you know, I know I'm talking scripture a lot, but um if we're gonna take the Bible seriously, and he says make disciples of all nations, you will never make a disciple by doing hit and run ministry. To make a disciple, they have to live life with you. You have to live life with them. You have to be in their life day in and day out for them to be able to see the example that they should be living. You know, it's like for them to be able to become more like you. That's what a disciple is, right? And so it's like mentor mentee. You know, it's like you know, no one is going to become, you know, a greater like mechanic without having someone teach them what that looks like, you know, and answering those questions when they have questions. And so I didn't understand that at that time, but you know, that was a wrong perspective. I really believe that at that time there are many people that are willing to listen, and there are many people that are willing to answer the call. I just hadn't experienced that at that time.
Mm.
And but I've been doing this now for years, and I was like, I have found people that are willing to rise up and make the difference. So I'm very glad. And if I had stayed in that encampment, I would have only reached that one community.
Mm.
Today, we are reaching 7,500 families island wide. And there's like
wow.
over 15 villages around, like, as far as encampments and villages around the island that we're able to impact because, you know, because I went home. And I would not have understood that at that time. You know, it's like, so that's a big deal. But leaving that community, I remember after my experiences with all these children, I said, doing nothing is not an option. That's one of my mottos. Doing nothing is not an
Love it.
option. And I went home knowing that I needed to help these kids, and I could understand that one of the biggest things was with education. And so I went home, I cleared my couches, took all of my couches out of my living room, lined it with old computer desks, bought old math
Wow.
books, no, iMacs, and I began tutoring. These
Wow.
children from the homeless encampment, I live 2 miles away, would walk every day to my house because of love. And so I got to really like pour into their lives at times that things got really rough in their life. Many of them wound up coming to live with me. And they put our family on the news for that stay, and people started to call us and say, you know, say, hey, we got these donations, can you pick it up? And that took us into a whole other realm of, oh yeah, we'll pick up a truckload here, a truckload there, and that truckload without any sales advertisements whatsoever, just by doing truckload after truckload, became box truckloads to now we're 18-wheeler trucks having to bring in
Wow.
donations to our
Wow.
center island wide. It just was all word of mouth, and I never expected to be doing what I'm doing. But even with tutoring these kids, there was one subject that I could not help these kids with, and that was with math. I dropped out my junior year of high school because I was so shy, and I was in geometry, and I just couldn't understand geometry for the life of me. And so I wound up dropping out and getting my GED that year. So I actually graduated a year early. um but I didn't go to college. I got married at 19. I started having children by the time I was 20. I had my first daughter. And then I went on to have those 7 biological children, the 2 that were adopted, so 9 legal children. And so my mom had said, you know, it's like, hey, you wouldn't qualify for scholarships, you know, it's like, and there's no way we can help, you know, financially, and women should raise their families. So that was the mentality, you know, as a young woman, that this is what we're supposed to do. So I never went to college, but here I am in this place trying to help these kids and tutor these kids, and my kids are bringing home homework from their math classes, and I was like, oh, I can't help you with that. Like, I said, you got to go to your, you know, try find a tutor. Well, we couldn't really find math tutors. It was really difficult at the schools. So I went back to college and I started my college, and that's where I met you, Erin. You know, it's like that's where I met you, and you were the best academic advisor for real. It was so amazing, you know, the help I got there. And this is amazing. I went to become a teacher, and it was my passion to help these kids to be successful from kindergarten through college. I needed to educate myself so that I could help them through. And so I chose the subject of secondary education and mathematics, which was my biggest fear. My biggest fear. I cried so much. I kept telling myself this. I said, nobody is born genius unless you're autistic. It's like you're trained into geniusness. You know, it's like, and it's so repetition, repetition, repetition. If I said, I'm not so dumb that if I did the same problem 100 times that I cannot get it. So I was determined. And I spent hours and hours and hours studying this math. And this is the amazing part of it. And I feel like we're watching the Red Sea part is there's two miracles in this whole college journey. One is that I was a straight A student, 4.0 student, even up till now while I'm getting my master's. Still been a 4.0 student. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 115 credits. So with with for my bachelor's, and I did calculus and all of that, and it was a straight
Wow.
A student. That's
Wow.
incredible,
That's
incredible.
incredible.
But the second miracle is that I had told God, I said, I'm willing to go to school because I felt like He was telling me to go to school. And I said, I'm willing to go, but I can't take away any finances from the children that I'm caring for. It's like I've got
Mm.
all these kids in my house now. And I said they need that. You know, it's like we can't spare any finances. We didn't have EBT or any of that. You know, like we were right outside of the range to be able to qualify for that. I'm more concerned about that child succeeding educationally than any finances. So I really put it
Mm.
on God to provide for our family financially. And we always had everything we needed. We never starved. We always had more than enough. On top of that, you know, scholarships kept coming in. And I graduated with my bachelor's with zero debt. No debt. I don't have a
Woohoo!
single bit of debt, right?
Yay,
That's
So
Abby.
yeah.
incredible.
That is.
Mm.
When you do the
Wow.
right thing, right? I call it God provides. God
Wow.
And
provides
you
where
worked
he
hard
guides.
too.
I
You
did.
worked
Oh,
really
I
hard
worked really
too.
hard. Yes, yes.
Wow.
I
And
worked very hard. I mean, 15 kids or 17 kids at times, picking up donations, going full time to college. You know, it's like it was a lot of work. Yeah.
wow. Wow, that's inspiring. I need to tell my students they need to study.
Just tell them repeat the problem 100 times.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
you're pursuing a graduate degree now?
Okay, so my bachelor's in science was secondary education in mathematics, and so I'm able to help the kids really succeed. English is actually or writing is probably the easiest thing for me. So I can help them with any subject now at this point. I'm really confident that I can help them with any subject, science, you know, social studies, anything. And but here's what happened. After I left the encampment, this is something that only came out more recently. I didn't share this, but I wound up marrying somebody that also was raised in Waianae. I met him while I was in high school, and he was so badly abused, like sexually abused. I mean, like emotionally abused, psychologically abused. I mean, it was just he was hung upside down in trees, beaten, you know, like shot with water hoses while everybody's laughing. The kind of sexual abuse is so extreme that it makes me cringe to think that anybody could do this to babies. They were so little. And so there was so much abuse in their home. I mean, if you were standing in front of the TV, they would throw a big huge water bottle right at your head, and you're 5 years old. You know, it's like that kind of stuff is extreme. Wish I could say that that's not ordinary for these families that we work with, but when I've talked with all these children, after it's become the norm. Like that's the story of many of their lives. And so I wound up, you know, like, you know, just hearing his story at 16, and I just remember not realizing that that wasn't real love because I had never ever experienced it, but I realized I had a big amount of compassion, feeling of compassion, and so I stuck with him through those years, and I wound up marrying him. But abuse was right around the corner for me, and I stayed very silent through it all. And I loved him, and I always just kind of like I knew how to love well, So just loving him, hoping that love would, because I really believe that love has the power to heal. I've come to realize it does have the power to heal, but someone has to be able to be willing to receive it and to
Mm,
allow it to have that impact. And it's like there is a part that they do play in that. It's
mm,
like, but I stayed very for 24 years, 21 years married, 3 years that we were together dating. And and really, like, by the time I realized I was in a really bad situation, I was having children. And I just fought to survive for my children. I mean, my children are the reason why I've been able to get through so many things, apart from God is number one, but my children um, have really been the inspiration to get up every day when I didn't want to get up. When I didn't want to live anymore, I had children to live for. When I was struggling in college and my brain was just I had the hugest headache, it's like, and when I just like, I can't do this, I would look at all these homeless kids and all these kids that were needing me to rise up for them to survive. And I'd get up again and
wow.
again and again. But finally in 2021, I really had heard God say, that's enough. It's like, that's enough. And you need to get out. I was having seizures every day. The abuse had gotten so bad, and I was having seizures on a massive level. And unfortunately at 37, so this is right after the encampment and staying at the encampment. So this in 2016, May through July is when I stayed at the encampment. And then in 2017, is where I wound up having a seizure in a woman's home that I was helping. And they put me in a room, and I'm just gonna make a long story short, but it's just that there was a man that lived in that home, and he wound up taking advantage of me that night, and he wound up raping me that night. And I just remember I couldn't breathe. I was like, I woke up, I felt like I had swam through oil. That's what it felt like. And I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't remember anything. It's like, it was just such an intense moment. I had never been with anybody else. The only person I'd ever kissed and ever been with was my husband at that time. And so it was such an intense moment. Talk about the crushing. Um, and, uh, and, and it was in that time of just like, again, trying to survive. I had all these kids in my home, and when that was a time in my life that I just was like, I can't make it. I can't make it through this. Like, this was so hard. And talk about a knife that just got shoved in your chest and came out all the way through the back. It just felt like you couldn't move. And I remember crying for 2 months straight, and God had to take me through a year and a half of just healing. At that time, everything was going wrong. I mean, the person that we called Tutu, that we had Hanayed in our family, from 2 days after we left the encampment, they said, oh, she's got, just a couple weeks to live. I want to becoming her 24-hour caretaker. Cars were breaking down. Finances were like a problem. I mean, there was just like, boom, every 2 days there's something bad that happened. And then there was that. And I just remember it was such a crushing time of my life. And, but again, it was my faith in God and this walk and journey with God that was able to help me to get through that. But it was these kids, like, looking at them, and they had no idea what I had been through. I hadn't said anything for months. At first I had only told my husband at the time, what had happened. But from that moment of telling him, and he said, I forgive you. I know you would never have done that on purpose, because I was never the type to ever, flirt with anybody or anything. I was not the type, but I think that experience of me going through the rape triggered all the abuse in him. And he was not the same after that. He became very violent. It was like, I really, really, truly believe he has a dissociative identity disorder, because he definitely has another personality. It would rise up at 3 to 4 in the morning every night. And that's
Wow.
where I would get bruised and bleeding, and just was really intense. It was an intense time. So I never even got a chance to recover from that before I was spiraling into this other, insane abuse. And I was just fighting to survive. Every day I was waking up to survive. And that's where I met you, Erin. And I was just like, that's where I went into education. And what really did help at that time was being busy. was
Mhm.
that I didn't have a lot of time to think about what had happened because I was filling my mind with all these other things. But I still had to at one point in time realize it's like that wasn't the cure to it. I had to deal with those real issues. And so 2021, I finally had the courage to leave the abuse, and I went through a journey of healing from traumas. What I had not ever expected, and I'm sure that anybody who studied trauma knows this better than I did at the time. You know, I would hear all these women who left abuse, and I'd be like, "Yay, yay, you
Mm.
finally left abuse!" Or even if it was a man, you know, that left abuse, and I was just like, "You're finally out," right? And so here now it's me. I'm finally out. What no one had ever told me was that's not the end of it. That's the beginning. You know, it's like, so about 6 months after leaving, about 2 months later, I stopped having all seizures. They had found out that the seizures were all due to trauma. It wasn't
Wow.
epileptic, it was because of the trauma. But about 6 months after leaving, I started going through crazy PTSD. Like, I mean, it was just like I'd wake up like in this room, just like gasping for air, like, and I have never experienced anything like this, but I'm sitting on my bed and I feel like I'm free falling. Like I'm sitting down, but it feels like I'm just free falling. And I do not like roller coasters. So this is not a nice feeling. And so I get up and I'm walking and pacing back and forth, and I still feel like I'm free falling. I mean, it was crazy anxiety and all these emotions are running. And I would wake up many times, you know, it's like when my limbic system reconnected to some, my memories were starting to surface without my permission. You know, it's like
Mm.
my body would start to shake and tremble the entire day. I couldn't stop my body from shaking, and I'd feel like a little girl, like just so scared. And I'm not a fearful person, so it was just such, there were emotions and anxiety and feelings I had never. I'm a very calm person and logical person. It was I was irrational. I was like, what's going on? Like somebody's here, you know, like you're somebody's out my door. You know, it was very difficult. And I can equate that to soldiers who have gone to war, and they're in their moment and they're suppressing these memories and they're surviving in their foxholes. But sometimes you'll see these movies where at the end of the day, when the bombs are subsiding, is like their body just starts to shake, right? You know, their limbic system just takes over. Or when they come home after all of that, then they have it all start to surface and they start, you know, running and acting crazy and being abusive. And I can say I experienced all of that. 24 years of abuse is a long time. And uh, it was a crazy last 2 years of going through all of this. And I had a great psychologist that helped me through this. She did EMDR, and that was amazing. And that really helped me to be able to deal with those traumatic memories of the past and get them, you know, filtered out of my amygdala or hippocampus and into my
Mm.
long-term memory in a safer place where I'm not so traumatized anymore. And so that has inspired me. Somebody did it for me. And I understand that most of these kids that I work with, most of these families I work with, have come from trauma.
Mm.
Somebody help me through that. I want to be able to help them through this. I will not be that psychologist talking from a book. I lived it. I survived it. I understand what they're going through, and I understand that they're not crazy, and I understand that it's real. I understand dissociative identity disorder that like none other. It's like I survived it, and there's just so much more to that. But it's just like and here's the thing about Aloha. My ex-husband was abused far before he became the abuser. What I did not need to do was see a laid out soldier and then take a gun and start shooting him too. I never once disrespected him. We never argued through our whole entire divorce. That sounds unheard of. We never once argued. To this day, I fully respect him. There were moments that I didn't think I was going to live, that I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. You know, even through that time, it was really an extreme moment of time or time, you know, it's like, um, but both of us are still trying to be pillars in each other's lives. Like it's amazing, you know, like the kind of love that we expressed even through this kind of event, and we still carry that for each other. And so he's still a big part of helping the communities in need. He still does donation pickups because he still believes in that. We still raise the kids together. All 15 kids had told me when I brought them together, said, how many of you guys want me to stay? I fought for a marriage. I tried to stay. I didn't want you to be a statistic. All 15 kids said, I want you out. And all 15 came to stay with me. But we have all been his cheerleader and praying that he'll go through his healing process. He hasn't started yet, but we're still praying that he will go get the healing that he needs. But we're going to be here as pillars in his life till the day he dies.
Oh, Abby, I think what strikes me so much about all that you've shared is just that the underlying current is love. It's aloha. It's, from what you have created in your home environment to what you brought with you when you went to Pu'uhonua, to even the grace that you give to a partner who has had his own struggles. Your life is you're just a walking example of what it means to have grace and to give and allow to receive aloha. And that's amazing what you do.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I thought on the word aloha, and this kind of makes me cry, but I just thought on the word because I my whole life, if there's going to be something on my gravestone, is that she loved and the agape love, and and I think of the word aloha and love, it's like how it's tied into love and compassion and generosity and integrity. I operate in every one of those aspects, but I broke apart the word aloha and I think about the alo meaning face and ha meaning breath, right? And how when the Hawaiians would come together, they would put their heads together, face to face, breath to breath. And I think if you're really going to have a community that really shows aloha, then we're going to come face to face with our community. We're going to give every breath we have to live our lives fully for those that we're facing. We're not going to turn our eyes and just ignore what we're seeing. We're going to really face it head on. It's like head on. It's like you cannot ignore it. It's like I said, doing nothing is not an option. And so I've embraced this, like everywhere I go is like I don't treat a millionaire any different from a homeless person. I don't seem to have a filter in the way I love people. But when God breathed into a pile of dust, it's like it made something beautiful. Here we are. We stand here, amazing creations that science just still finds fascinating as humans, right? And I think about all the crushing moments, the beatings, the rape. There's so many criticisms that came as a pastor, having to go through what I've gone through, and people not understanding. And so there was many crushing moments. But here's what I've come to understand in my walk with God. There's not a point that this world can crush me, even if it could grind me to a million pieces. There's not a point that this world can crush me that God cannot pick up the pieces and breathe upon. Out of the ashes, I'll rise, and out of my sorrows, I'm going to soar. Persecuted, but not abandoned. I'm struck down, but I'm not destroyed. I'm in a battle, but I'm not defeated, because God has been my shelter through every storm, and not a single thing can take me from the mighty hand of God. It's a song I wrote. It's a song I wrote. It's like because it's the truth. It's like I've lived this. It's like He took the ashes and breathed upon it and has given me life. I do not feel like I'm broken. I do not feel like I have a scar. I don't know how He could put me back together in that kind of way, but there's no way I could be doing what I'm doing if I stay broken. I can't walk on a broken leg. I couldn't move a broken arm. It's like, but He took every single knife. I had to forgive the people who hurt me. I had to choose to pull that knife. God, I choose to forgive it and give it to Him and heal from wound after wound after wound. And so don't carry around that dead weight, and remember, it's like that people who have been hurting people, we say hurt people have hurt people, right? And that's a true statement. But what if we were not taking sandpaper to the wound? What if we decided to be gentle with the wound and I was gentle with a wounded person. And like I said, live life with them face to face. I'm not leaving. I tell these kids all the time, I said, I'm not leaving this relationship. Once you walked into a relationship with me, I said, I'm not going anywhere. The only option out of a relationship with me is if you leave it. I said, I'm staying. And these kids have put me through the ringer, I have to say. But it took years for them to gain the trust and really change their mindset from that negative poverty mindset to a prosperous, positive mindset. And I understand it takes years to build trust before they really believe that you are really in it. And that they would really finally start to tell their stories. Yet last year we had our first 2 graduates. And that's been amazing, you know, because we started tutoring these kids years ago. And this year we're going to have another one of the graduates. You know, I have 2 daughters, one biological, one Hanai, that's going to be graduating. So these are the things that continue to keep me going. And one of the things that one of these kids had said to me, what keeps you motivated, Auntie? Like, why do you go out of your way? Why do you put up with everything we do? Is like, what inspires you to keep going every day? And I tell him this story, and I hope it's a blessing to you. As like, one day I was at a transitional shelter, and this 5th grade boy had come up to his father, and he said, Dad, he's like, I need new shoes. And he lifted up his shoes, and the soles had disconnected from his shoe, and so his shoes were talking. And the dad had such sad eyes, and he looked at his son and he said, Son, he said, you know, we don't have that much. He said, this is how much I get paid. It was like 500. He said, by the time I pay the rent and the utilities, he said, I only have $50 to my name, and I need to use that for the toilet paper and the toothpaste and stuff that we need. And he says, you just got to be grateful for what you have. And I remember watching this transaction as the son looked into a father, because the father said it in a loving way. You could see how the father loved the son, and you could see how the son loved the father. And he said, yeah, I know, Dad, it's okay. And they both put their head down and they had such sad eyes. And I remember telling these kids who were asking me, I said, this is what motivates me. I said, one day I want to be there when your kids ask you, Dad, can I buy a brand new pair of shoes? And you say, yes, son, let's go buy a pair of shoes. Because their whole future had changed. They went from poverty to being successful. They were educated and able to provide for their family. That would be a dream come true for me. I don't need any payback. I would just love to see that one day, you know. So that's been my big inspiration.
Wow.
Well, I think you clearly inspire people in the work that you do and the way in which you live your life. And, you know, and you talk about seeing these people who inspire you. Is there one individual, though, that you can credit in terms of really just being that person that has helped you find what your purpose in life is and has really served as that foundation? Is there any one person that you can identify as being
There's
your
not a
inspirational figure?
there's not a person. Well, there is a person. He is a person, but you know, not in the way that most people think. But I would say Jesus. Jesus has been my biggest inspiration because of the way he loves. And I have lived my life according to 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 since I was a young adult. When I first heard that God is love in Philippians 4:7-8, that God is love, and anybody who loves knows God, you know. And so when I looked at 1 Corinthians 13:4-7, and I see love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking. It does not delight in evil, or it does not, it does not hold a record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. Always protects, it always trusts, it always perseveres. And it says love never fails. And so then when I put God's name, God is patient, God is kind. And so I've witnessed this in my own life of him being patient with me when I was not doing everything right. His kindness. He is never rude to me. He never speaks rude, and he's never like always asking me to do something for his own gain. It's always for mine. And I'm just watched how he's protected me and persevered after me and loved. And then I decided, said, I want to be like him. And so Abby is patient. I laughed when I first said that. And I said, I need work. So then God gave me 12 children. And then that worked out. I got my master's degree in patience. So we moved on to Abby is kind. Abby is not rude. Oh, that one I had to work on too. Abby's not easily angered. It's like wine-eyed girl was coming out at times. It's like, so I live this. This is my lifelong message that I live out every day. And if I will live this in this world, we will see a transformed world if every person in the world would live. You would not hurt people. We would not see, we would not see adultery. We would not see, lying. We wouldn't see stealing. It's like if people were kind and protective and all of these things, like we wouldn't see all the chaos that we see in this world. We wouldn't even see people starving in this world if people would just live out this message. I can think of all the excuses to why we would say we can treat people wrong. Here's one excuse. I was tired. It's like, and I was tired, so that's why I lashed out. It's like that's why I acted the way I did. Or we could say like I was in pain. It's like I was in pain, so that's why I lashed out. Or they deserved it because look at what they did. They rejected me. It's like they abandoned me, or they were calling me names. They treated me bad. They beat me up. It's like, so that's why I acted out. I have been trampled on by so many. And in the work that I do, the very people I've helped have stolen from me at times. I've been criticized. I've been gossiped about. I've been slandered. I was like, some things are so not true. I've been hated on, and people would think, how could somebody hate somebody who's so loving? It's like, I don't know either. but there are thoughts in people's minds that go on that are not true. And if you're going to do this work, these kids that I brought in, they came in with traumas. Guess who they lashed out on? Guess who got all those words, those cruel words? I had kids that I poured my whole life into for 5 years, some of them 8 years, poured my life into. And then they would walk away and they would say, it's like, I just want to live the party life. And I'm like, what? You know how much money I invested into these children? You know how much time I spent, hours when I should have been doing my college work, but I stressed myself out to sit with them and talk with them and counsel them and love on them. And you could get really frustrated. Here's something I had to come to learn. One day Jesus gave me an illustration, and I love talking to my best friend. He is my best friend. I talk to him like as if he's a real person, because he is to me. And so I was broken. One of those kids had left. And I've learned that this is normal now, but I didn't know that at the time. And I was crying and I was so heartbroken. I did not want to do it anymore. And I remember having this vision, and I was on this boat and I was looking at this fisherman, and he cast out this huge line, like the kind of catching marlin, and they catch up this huge line. And it goes, right, it finally drops in. And then like all of a sudden you see it hooks something, and you see this huge fish jumping in and out of the water. They're like, oh yeah, all these guys are cheering, and they're like, really need it, this guy's really need it. And there's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden in this vision, like hours have passed, and there's not so much yeahs going on, but you see this guy's veins popping out, and he's dripping, just drenched in sweat, and he's just reeling it in so slow now, because you could just see he could just barely reel it in. And so much time has passed. Finally the fish is at the edge of the boat. They're about to go and hook it in and bring it in. Well, I don't know if it got off the hook or if the line broke, but all of a sudden you see this fish swimming away. And in this vision, I looked at this fisherman who looked so defeated, because they're all like, no, right? And I remember like looking at this fisherman and saying, do you think you would ever fish again after that? And he looked at me like I was insane. And honestly, I felt stupid the moment I asked the question. It's like, of course he's going to fish again. That's just part of it. That's just what happened. You win some, you lose some. It's like, and I remember hearing God saying, Abby, there's millions of fish in that water. What's the chances if he kept throwing that line out that he wouldn't catch one? And he said, Abby, there's billions of people in this world. There are many children that are waiting for you. He said, if one doesn't want to be with you and totally rejects you, he said, there's millions of children out there that would love someone to love them, would love someone to be there for them. He said, keep your eyes on the ones that need you. Then, like, basically don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. Find that one. Keep fishing. Don't stop fishing. And this is the interesting part. So I do that, and I never wind up getting discouraged now, because I just shift my focus. There's another child out there. There's another kid that needs to be loved. There's another kid that needs to be helped with their education. And this is the interesting part, because now I've been doing this for years. Some days you're out there fishing, minding your own business, just enjoying God's beauty. And this fish just jumps in your boat. Just randomly. It's like, oh, that was the same fish. And I have found that these kids, that even though they reject me at times and they will leave, uh, they almost always all have come back at some
Wow.
point in time, because they know who really loves them. And I tell them, I said, listen, if you leave, I said, even if you're 30, just know I'll always be here. If you're done, you've tried that life, you find out, like I've said, it leads to nothing. I said, and you're done, you're tired. I said, we'll start from ground zero and you come back. It's like, I'll be here. And I've been faithful to that all these years.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing all those amazing stories and heartfelt stories and just lessons. I think there's lessons in everything that you've shared with us. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, I think the thing that my vision is that I'm not the one doing this. I'm like, I could never do this alone. Those donations don't show up by itself. There's a team of us at Macau Community Center. I have my board, I have Stacy Monder, and I have Amy Ayao, I have Elisa Nakamoto, I have Cheyenne Kapalolo Ayao. These are the core people at Macau Community Center that have taken a huge load. And then there's my ex-husband, Elton Eli, who does a lot of donation pickups. I want us to know that it's community in unity that makes a difference. And I have this statement, I say community and unity brings vision back through a world that's divided, through the vision. It's like, and I will bring forth vision through division. And it's like, because we have such a divided society. It's like I go into these $1 million homes, in Hawaii Kai, and then you go Mililani, and you go, to Manoa, and you definitely see the difference, it's like, and then you go into the Waianae encampments, and you go into their schools versus our schools, like big difference, and so you see a divided society for sure. But when communities begin to unify, and we really, like, you see a need and you begin to meet it, I think we will be able to give people who feel like they have no purpose and that nobody cares. It's like you're gonna bring life back into a community where people are gonna then be able to have a vision for themselves again. And so we don't do this alone. I thank God for all the communities and all the people who have said, I can be a part of the solution. That we're not waiting for the government. That's the whole thing about Aloha, facing it yourself. You don't ignore it and wait for somebody else to do it. This is our kuleana. This is our responsibility. Is like, I'm not going to wait for somebody else. It's like, let it be us, let it be us. But we have people like companies like Coldwell Banker. There are other companies that want to remain anonymous, but like, there's so many companies that have been donating to the people who are living in poverty. We have churches, and so funny, so I'm the pastor of Waianae Assembly of God, but we have Catholic churches, Mormon churches, Lutheran churches. We even have churches that are like, basically anybody can come to that church, and they all embrace each other. And so we have all unified to make a difference. And we put aside all the differences. Who cares about that? We're working together to be a blessing to those who are in need. We're all saying, it's like, I can be part of the solution. And so one other area that I've learned is, like, you cannot just bring quality education and think that these children who come from these kinds of situations are gonna be successful. You have to partner stability with education, otherwise it falls to the wayside either way. You have to have a person that's in their life says, I believe in you, and I'm going to be here all the way through, encouraging you. That's a stable a relationship in their life, but you also need to bring stabilization to their felt needs. It's like it is really hard to get a good education when you're sleeping on the ground every night, when you have to go dumpster diving for pots and pans, when you don't know when there's going to be food, or it's like you're getting bullied because of the kind of clothes you're having to wear. It's like it's very difficult to be successful without that stability. So that's the reason why we have the Makaha Community Center distribution side, but then we also have the educational side where I'm helping these kids specifically from the transitional shelters or homeless encampments with education. That's my passion, to break them out of generational poverty. And one thing that's cool is that last year, August, I got hired with the Department of Education. Here I get a math degree, but I get hired with the Department of Education as the homeless liaison for the Mount
Yay,
Nakuli Waianae district. So
congratulations.
I get to work closely with this community and make more impact through this position. So yeah, that's just something, is like everybody can be the solution. None of us are exempt. Every one of us can do something. It's like whether it's loving an elderly person who has no one and giving aloha to that person, or meeting that child that needs help with their schoolwork, or even just needs to be praised and believed in. There are people around us that are hurting in every community. I meet people from Hawaii Kai that are hurting. I meet people in even homes where they're living with millionaires. They're hurting. Just open your eyes. It's all around us. There's needs all around us, and we can all be a part of sharing this aloha in our world today.
Abby, you are amazing in what you've done with your children, what you've done in your church, and what you've done in the Makaha Community Center. I love your phrase, community in unity, and I think that's so powerful. So say someone wants to get involved, how can they learn more about Makaha Community Center? How can they be someone who gets up and takes inspired action?
That's awesome. Well, they can access our website. It's makahacommunitycenter.org. They can learn a lot about us through that. We do have a Facebook group page that has 7,200 members. And one of those is just meeting the felt needs, so it's called God Provides / Makaha Community Center. And if you have donations that you would like to give to people, you can post it there. A lot of times the families will pick up directly from you. Or if you would like to contact us, we do have 2 box trucks that go out every single month to pick up donations around the island. But we have a Makaha Community Center cell phone at this point, and you can text pictures of donations you'd like to give. So that's 808-436-9629. And we'll schedule a pickup with you. We have been operating completely out of love, and so we don't at this time have any grants. We've never had a grant or anything. So it's what people donate that keeps us our doors open. So there is a place on our webpage that you can donate if you'd like to help us financially. And if you are needing to volunteer or wanting to volunteer, there are different ways you can do that. So just give us a call and we'll discuss those options with you. Yeah.
Great. Can you do that phone number one more time for us, Abby?
Sure. The number is 808-436-9629.
We're just so grateful. Every time I'm in your presence, my heart is just so full. To me, you are just the epitome of not a survivor only, but also a thriver. Yes, you have risen from the ashes and you are glowing brighter than ever. And, I just keep doing the wonderful work that you're doing. You're making a difference. You are truly making a difference. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories with us today. Do you all feel inspired?
Yes.
Well, Amy's crying, but but we all feel inspired too.
Yes.
It's funny because I think of what I do is so simple. It's really hard to understand when people think that it's so amazing, because I just I pick up donations, I drop it off.
No, it's so much more
Doesn't seem
than
all that
that.
inspiring.
No, absolutely, because you do it all from love. And I think that shines through. So everyone, remember the name Abigail Eli and the Makaha Community Center, and just know that together we really all can make a difference and bring aloha to those who need it most. So until next time, everyone, thank you, Abby, for being here today. Ohui ho, everyone. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Bye.